Hi, hello, welcome to the Lunar Review. I'm your host Vanessa, and today I'm going to be talking about the sign of Gemini. So Gemini is a light sign. It's curious and social, and it loves to communicate using the hands in particular. And it's no wonder because the body parts that Gemini rules over are the hands and the arms and the lungs. Gemini can also be very charming and quite endearing, which will really come in handy because, as we'll learn, the sign has a mischievous element to it as well. Gemini is a mutable sign, and when we say mutable, that means that this sign occurs at the end of a season. So things are changing, things are in flux, and it's perfect because Gemini is adaptable, very adaptable. It's the most adaptable sign in the zodiac. So Gemini can walk into a room and just instantly get a read on what's going on. They can also do this with people and situations, and this makes them excellent communicators because they can shape themselves instantaneously into this perfect vehicle for transmitting ideas, giving ideas, for knowing the right thing to say, and to say these things quickly and on the spot, on the fly. So Gemini can start a conversation, keep a conversation rolling. They know what questions to ask. They'll know what to say. They can redirect conversations and throw monkey wrenches into them and shatter them and end conversations. Gemini adapts to situations very quickly. It is their talent. It's what they thrive on. It's what defines them. And this is why their opinions can change so radically or so quickly, because it all depends on what new information or experiences are coming in. It's an air sign. Gemini is air. So this means that there's an emphasis on developing the mind, intellect, logic, reasoning. And one of the ways we do this is through social relationships, by developing relationships. And for Gemini, no matter how deep they are, or in the Gemini case, how light or superficial, but many there are, they're all very significant. And the first reaction to newness, something novel, for Gemini will be through logic. And this is opposed to taking something in through, say, the emotional realm, like the sign of Cancer, the sign that comes after Gemini. Cancer will take things in through the heart. So Gemini, being an air sign, is definitely more focused on the intellect. Gemini is also yang, so that means it's masculine in nature. And Gemini is very outgoing. This is a sign that wants to get out of the house, leave the hearth and home, wants to go out and meet the world and meet the challenges, exert their will. So in this way, it's very yang. And there's a lot of tension in the body, a lot of nervous tension. Gemini does rule over the nervous system, but there's so much energy in the head that sometimes the body can't process it. So Gemini needs movement and freedom. It needs to move about. And if it doesn't, that's the tension can really build up. So there could be, at worst, nervous breakdown. So Gemini really needs to have newness coming in, like a steady drip of excitement, if not excitement, just something novel. They thrive on this type of change and things coming in. The boredom is definitely the enemy with Gemini, as is overthinking. And the direction of Gemini, which also makes it yang, is up and out, and then all over the place. And that's a very yang direction. And the other thing that makes this a yang sign, I would say, is because of the time of year that it occurs. It's the end of spring, and summer solstice is on the way. Summer solstice occurs at the very end, well, technically at the beginning of Cancer, but in Gemini, they're heading towards the light. Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. First we had Aries, and Aries, fearless Aries, will just go out and do it, and will just try anything. So Aries initiated, and then we had Taurus, and gentle, patient, determined Taurus could really just stick with one thing and be stable and steady and grow and work with what already exists. And now we have Gemini. So Gemini steps up to the plate and it's Gemini's turn. So now this sign is strong enough, it's mature enough, it's gotten to the point where it knows its desire, and the desire is to leave the home and go out into the world, have as many experiences as possible. Variety, many and variety, I would say, is an MO for Gemini. And Gemini, having this inborn sense of how to communicate, can be a chameleon and fit in with all different types of group of people. They can bring a lightheartedness, a sense of fun, also a sense of enjoyment, so that they are well received and can make themselves amenable to all different types of people. And they can be the teacher. They are able to express well, efficiently, and objectively. They can also be the student, which requires more listening. So that might be slightly more of a challenge for Gemini because their mind is in many different directions at one time. And, I think of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini as the new kids on the zodiac block because they're the first three signs. So their inexperience is their strength. For Gemini, this means that their mind is not hardened yet. Their mind is soft and malleable and able to take in and delight in new ideas. Of course, they'll have opinions, but they're not so rigid that they can't take in something that will even shake the foundations of their life. And I think of this in comparison to another air sign, Aquarius, which is at the end of the zodiac, and it's a fixed sign. And so Aquarius, one of their strengths is this fixity, this rigidity. They can latch on to an idea, just hone in on it, and keep going until they reach a conclusion on just a genius level. So that's their strength. But Gemini doesn't have this sort of calcified ability to just stick with one thing. And that's its strength. The mind it's more gummy. So it's going to be much more receptive. The sign for Gemini is the twins, and the twins represent duality. So this means that Gemini is straddling two worlds at all times. Gemini can want two opposing things at the same exact time. So it's no wonder that this is a very nervous sign, and this is why we see sometimes these attributes such as inconsistency or unpredictability or even moodiness in Gemini. And it brings us to this notion of double lives, and in Gemini's case, multiple lives, that there are multiple expressions of a Gemini personality and all of them are legit. It's just different scenarios bring out different aspects of the personality. And the more varied the experiences that Gemini has, the more he's going to learn about himself. The entrepreneur is actually a perfect archetype for Gemini because the entrepreneur has to take on so many different roles. They've got to be the creative talent for their business. They've got to learn how to make a video, edit it, do the lighting, do makeup, do staging. They've got to learn PR. They've got to go out and hustle for money to get money for their project. They've got to learn how to make the coffee. So I think the entrepreneur is definitely a good, solid archetype for Gemini. For Gemini, it's actually easier to get things done when there are multiple things to be done, that when Gemini can multitask. I once heard a Vedic astrologer describe the energy of Gemini in a very interesting way. He said that Gemini is equally scattered in all directions. And I thought this was just great because, this is what is staving off boredom and keeping motivation going and feeding this need for constant change and novelty. And that when you do have your direction, your energy going in all these different directions, it actually organizes, the Gemini can organize this and it will strengthen a project. And I think of Gemini having a certain finesse that I liken to a juggler. So a juggler, okay, you've got one ball, boring, not much going on. Okay, you add two, okay, not bad, we're getting somewhere. Three, you have three, okay, now you've got a show. Like, this is really cool to watch. But you add 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and wow, now you've got a production. You know, add some fireworks, you've got Broadway here. And I feel this is how Gemini works, that Gemini organizes himself and really functions at his highest when there's an element of chaos involved. Another archetype that describes Gemini is that of the trickster. And when I think of one of the great tricksters from Norse mythology, I think of Loki. And Loki, wow, I mean, what a character. His antics and his cunning have caused great harm to his people. And often when he was forced to fix a situation that he was the one who caused in the first place, there was always a benefit, a great benefit to his people, a boon, an advancement, a huge gift that changed the course for everyone. So I think this speaks of the mischievous side of Gemini, but with a purpose. You know, it may seem irreverent or experimental, but sometimes it changes the course of things for the better, ultimately. However, it can be malicious too. You know, Gemini does have to be careful because you could be too experimental. You could say something like, oh, I've heard some really interesting things about you. Or tell someone, okay, here, touch these two wires together. So Gemini has to be careful that they aren't too experimental, like let's just say this and see what happens, or out of a sense of boredom, or they just want to be amused. So yes, Gemini does have to be careful of what comes out of their mouth. Hermes is also one of the great tricksters. Hermes is from Greek mythology. So Hermes was not a god of the underworld, but he did have the privilege of escorting newly dead souls to the underworld. He was a psychopomp. So yeah, he guided the souls. So therefore, he was able to freely come and go to the underworld and go back. He was also a messenger of the gods. He delivered messages, important ones. Sometimes he messed with them a little bit because he's a trickster. But Hermes knows the dark side. Hermes dwells in the dark side for some of the time. So Hermes has to be fluent in the language, culture, and customs of the dead and of the living. And he's also got to be dexterous and fluid enough to make the journey, to travel from light into dark, and then from dark into light. So Gemini does not live in the underworld, but Gemini tastes it, it knows it. It is different than the sign of Scorpio, because Scorpio loves the deep dive, can go deep into the psyche, wants intense experiences. This is not so with Gemini. Gemini, although Gemini does go to the underworld, straddling two worlds at the same time, Gemini can be cool-headed and logical, can deliver people, can deliver messages, but can come back from the underworld unscathed. Well, that's all for Gemini. I hope that you enjoyed. And if anyone would like to book a reading with me, an astrology reading, please go to my website, thelunarreview.com. And I will be back again. See you next time.